Okay, welcome again. Hi, y'all. Um, my name is BJ, and I also go by West. And we're here for presentation by our dear friend Greg Holden. As part of our Sharing the Path Salon series. Um, yeah, so let's start first just with a prayer. So feel free to close your eyes if that feels right to you. And let's just start with connecting with ourselves. Connect with your aliveness. I invite us to feel gratitude for our aliveness right now. The fact of being alive. And gratitude for all of the support that we receive every day and in every moment. We are so supported by things we can touch and feel and see, and by invisible, intangible forces. And again, I invite us to get in touch with the gratitude that's available for that support. Thank you. Thank you to all that supports our lives. And now I invite us to sense those of us gathered here as though in a circle. So feel your other selves gathered with you in circle, their aliveness. Sense our connectedness. And let us specifically invite support. Whatever support is available for this time together, for this call, for this brief moment on our journeys. Thank you for supporting us to hear one another, to learn from one another, to share clearly with one another. Thank you to our guides, our allies, our wisdom, our intuition. Thank you, Creator. Thank you, friends. Okay, now I'm going to share a couple of pieces of the culture of how we hold this space. So this is, again, the Sharing the Path Salon series. And part of the intention for this series is to practice together, to practice the open-hearted path together. So we have set out some specific intentions for how we do that. So let's all intend to listen to one another, listen for resonance, listen for where there's overlap. Where is it that you're sharing what's true for me? And that doesn't mean that we all have to agree, because we also honor free will. So if what you're sharing isn't resonating for me, I don't find the overlap, I want to honor your free will to have that experience and not get into the kind of way of needing to convince you of, hey, wait, no, I need you to see it this way. But instead, listen deeply for your experience and what can I learn from your experience. So that's some of how the invitation is to listen. And then also when we're sharing, the invitation is to share humbly from our own direct experience. And all that being said, what Greg has to share with us today will be from his own experience. So it may be really compelling, and it may be like, wow, he's speaking the truth. And, right, the invitation is not necessarily to believe him, but to find out for ourselves, right? He may be speaking the truth for us, but we can access that for ourselves and not turn over, the sense of authority to someone else. Okay, thanks for being here. Thanks for hearing all that. And I'll turn it over to my co-host, Kent.
Welcome, everybody. So good to see all the familiar faces. So Greg, our presenter today, has always been a spiritual seeker ever since childhood. He went to Catholic school and he was an altar boy as a child. In his teens, he left the Catholic Church and spent about 10 to 15 years not being very religious or into spirituality much. When he was around 30 years old, he began to meditate. And then when he was about 31 to 32, he attended a lecture by a Tibetan Buddhist. And that had a big impact on him. And after that, he became a Buddhist, practicing Buddhist. He has worked for 5 to 6 years as an interfaith end-of-life chaplain, a board-certified chaplain, which makes him preeminently qualified to hold this presentation today, I think. He found the Law of One material in 2022 or thereabouts. And BJ and I met him, or West and I met him for the first time that year also when he came to the Coming Home event in Black Mountain. And when I first met Greg and Peggy, they were coming back from a walk. And, I instantly felt like they were really good people. Like I like these people, even before we exchanged any words. So I'm very happy to have Greg do his presentation here today. And so, Greg, go ahead, take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Kent. We knew we loved you too because you were out there looking for mushrooms and you were out walking in here, and that's what we love too. Yeah. So, even better than being a chaplain, I'm a retired chaplain, which means I have time to talk about being a chaplain, which I didn't have. I actually worked as a chaplain. And in case you're wondering about the meaning of the hat, I had something called shingles this week. That was my catalyst for the week, and it makes these weird blotches, and it's distracting to me. It's almost as distracting as how hot this hat is. So maybe I have to take the hat off if you can live with it. So I'm, as Wes said, if you don't agree with anything I say, feel free to put some comments in the chat. I really want to have interaction. She or I are going to look in the chat, and we'll certainly have questions at the end. But I am open to discussion about what you think, and it's not all about me. It's not about I have the ultimate answer. I have my answer, and I'm thinking because as Law of One students, fellow students, something that I have experienced will have value for you too. So let's see if I can figure out how to share this again.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that part, Greg. We will have time for discussion at the end. Yeah.
But feel free to put something in the chat, if there's something that you experienced that's different, if there's something that you feel is different. Yeah, I'm going to have to take this hat off because I'm dying over here. So you get to see. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right, I like that. What's it all about? MA is Master of Arts. BCC is Board Certified Chaplain, which just means I appeared before a board of other chaplains and was questioned intensively and found to be suitable for certification, which was quite an accomplishment, especially as a Buddhist chaplain, but that's another story. So I came up with the idea for this talk only in the last year or so. The title has to do with what people used to call, I mean, I used to hear this phrase more often, the meaning of life. Monty Python, the meaning of life, you know. For most of my life, I wondered, why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing here? But now I, and those of us who study the law of one and the many other communications we have been given and things like journey of souls and destiny of souls, we have a pretty clear sense of the meaning of life. We're in an interesting situation. What do we do with this knowledge? And how do we live with it? And how do we interact with people who they don't have the same, I don't even want to say certainty, but they don't have the same framework. So that was my idea. But a few weeks ago, the focus of my talk changed. And that has to do with a friend of mine. It's part of the grand illusion that we all go through, that we don't think about the meaning of life often until we're faced with a death. And I certainly learned this as a chaplain working with the dying in hospice and in hospitals. While I was putting this talk together, however, a friend and colleague named Kevin Spencer died suddenly. This was just a few weeks ago. He was in our Heartland Law of One group. I'm a co-director along with West and my wife Peggy of that group. And he was in another channeling group called Red Court Channeling. And this is, the photo here is of Red Court Channeling. And that's Kevin on the third from left, standing next to me. And the other group, yeah. So he's shown in the back there. And this was just less than a week before he died. No indication of anything, of any trouble. He was a very private person, and he gave out only what he wanted to. But Kevin's death helped me to clarify what I want to say to you tonight. And so I would like to dedicate this talk to him. Cartoons are often a great place to find explorations of the meaning of life. The top one depicts my experience as a parent, and probably the experience of a lot of parents. My life has no meaning. Oh no! This is my experience these days. The second one is more about how death frames things for us and gets us thinking about all the stuff in between birth and death. The importance of the in-between stuff in the face of death that I experienced in the big public hospital where I worked as a chaplain from 2018 to 2021. So I became a chaplain late in life, and I'll say more about that later, but I worked in a hospice for a while. I always knew I was kind of called to work with elderly mostly and dying people. And I got a position with the palliative care team at this hospital, Cook County Hospital in Chicago. This is the largest public hospital in the United States. The overwhelming majority of patients who come here are poor people who live on the south and west side of Chicago, mostly African American and Hispanic. They don't have a lot of resources. They probably don't have insurance. They don't have possessions, and in some cases they are housing challenged. Yet they are incredibly brave in the face of long-term illness and death. And by brave, I mean that they faced the end of life with grace and sometimes even with good humor. They were stoic and accepting to an extent I did not see as much when I was a chaplain resident in another hospital on the other side of Chicago in a much more affluent suburb. I did not see the same character. I did not see the same earnestness, and I in the same sense of being comforted by meaning, by being connected to God, because these were overwhelmingly Christian hospitals, both of them. And I was, as a Buddhist, I was in a minority myself, but I never talked about being a Buddhist. I just went in as the chaplain. And I could say the chaplain because I was almost the only chaplain in this whole hospital. And people were incredibly accepting, and I had a wonderful experience and learned so much. How do we begin to make sense of all this in-between stuff between birth and death? In my experience, it is very common that people reject what they were taught, what we were taught to believe as kids. And we construct our own sense of meaning through reading, through study, through putting together multiple systems or aspects of life that resonate with them. And usually this is, in my case, it was walking away from the religion of my birth and piecing together a sense of meaning. I even, in my experience as a Buddhist, I met a person who grew up atheist. And that's what she learned. Her parents were devout atheist, again, if that could be said. And she found her path with Buddhism at the same time that I did. So it's not just about rejecting your religion, it's rejecting your belief of your childhood. So maybe you have felt this too. Show of hands if you're in the same boat. The question, I think, is what kind of service, when you choose the path of service to others, what kind of service can we provide to those who are struggling or searching for meaning and literally suffering? That was the idea behind this talk. So one of the universal questions is, why am I here and what am I supposed to do with my life and what's the meaning of life? And if we don't get any answers that seem right, we drift along with these things kind of smoldering in the back of our minds, unanswered. And that is until some crisis occurs that causes us to question our sense of meaning and really what we've been doing, how we've been living our lives, and how we've been affecting people around us. And this is part of the plot of this movie from 1966 called Alfie. This was the actor Michael Caine's first big starring role. This movie has since been remade with Jude Law in the title version, and you may be familiar with that, but this is the version I grew up with. And in the movie, Alfie is a playboy. He lives totally carelessly, happy-go-lucky, having fun and seducing lots of women. But he encounters some serious catalyst along the way. Among other things, he gets one married woman pregnant, and he discovers to his surprise that when she decides to have this child, and he discovers to his surprise that he loves this little boy, and he has a big urge to spend time with him and be a father to this kid. But the mother tells him to stay away and have no contact. So even worse things happen, which I won't mention, but at the end, there's a famous scene where he stands on a bridge overlooking the Thames, and he speaks directly to the camera. He speaks directly to the camera through the whole movie, but here is a long, famous monologue. And please keep in mind that this is a guy who has been thinking of himself only through the whole movie. He's had no consciousness of how he's been affecting these women that he has loved and left. And finally, he says, after all, it ain't through the eyes that you feel beauty. It's how the heart hungers for something that makes it beautiful. You know what? When I look back on my little life and the birds I've known, the women, I can't help think about all they have done for me. Is an amazing sentence from this guy at this point. And what I haven't done for them. They looked after me, cared for me, and I repaid them by never returning the favor. Yeah, I used to think I had the best end of the deal. What have I got really? I depend on nobody, and nobody depends on me. My life's my own. But I don't have peace of mind. And if you don't have that, you got nothing. So what's the answer? That's what I keep asking myself. What's it all about? You know what I mean? So Alfie endures this catalyst, and his previous worldview and his sense of meaning is shattered. He's broken open. His heart is broken. He's broken open, and he begins to ask important spiritual questions. And there's a famous song that Petula Clark gets to sing, "What's it all about, Alfie?" But I don't want to get distracted. Any comments in the chat? Am I asking this too early?
We don't have any comments yet.
All right. Feel free. Did you prefer the Jude Law version? Whatever.
I've never seen it, but I'm excited to watch it now.
So here are 4 main points that I want to get across. These are just my personal opinions, and I do not expect you to agree with them, and I'm open to discussion, et cetera, et cetera. 1, those who reject the beliefs they grew up with go on to construct their own meaning. I mean, often they piece together meaning from different traditions. We're all going to, and I think Caroline was here, we're all going to this event at Serpent Mound, by the way, in March, and it's very exciting Native American rituals and culture, and it should be fantastic. And it's wonderful that we can go there and learn and be exposed to these kind of things. That's what I'm talking about. And they don't even have to be spiritual in nature. It could be things like animals or mushrooms, or hiking or nature or sports and competition. 2, lack of meaning causes vulnerable persons to be hijacked. That is, their thoughts are consumed by something that wastes their time or that isn't good for them. Negative catalyst. 3, meaning and purpose might be a prerequisite for 4th density. I say might be because I'm not really sure about it, and I'm eager to get your opinions on this. I'm seriously wondering about this, but it occurs to me, so I thought I would rate. 4, it's better to believe in something rather than nothing. I guess this speaks for itself. My personal opinion is that some things are better than others. And I know that that could be controversial in some contexts, but that's my experience. Those who, and I'll expand on that those who believe in something do better than those who have nothing, especially when the chips are down and they're in pain and they've had one procedure after another and they're facing the end of their life. And yeah. So first, those who reject the beliefs they grow up with go on to construct their own meaning. This is me constructing beehives on top of our roof when we lived in Chicago. Walking away. This guy on the right is me. It's all dressed up in my Sunday best. And this is when we were going to Easter Mass at St. Stephen's Catholic Church in Des Plaines, Illinois, where I grew up. That's my brother and sister. And throughout my lifetime, this is the pattern I've seen over and over. You grow up believing in X because that's what your parents believe. You practice belief system X, and then you begin to question the core tenets of belief system X. And you don't find answers, or the answers don't satisfy you, or after some time, it just doesn't make sense, and you go on your way in your life without X. Can I have a show of hands if you have also rejected the religion or belief system you grew up with? Are there hands? Is anybody not raising?
Hands.
They can do.
Yeah.
Anybody not raising? I'm sorry.
They can do a react and raise their hand. Usually that means you have a question, but if you're asking for it, people can raise their hand by going to react.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Okay.
Yeah, right.
So I grew up Roman Catholic, and as Kent said, I was an altar boy. I was an altar boy at the time when altar boys were boys, and we wore these funny little robes, and there were all kinds of cool things we did, like pour the wine for the priest and ring the bells at certain times. And we had to learn some Latin too, uh, which was pretty cool, I thought. Um, but around my teen years, when I started thinking about why aren't there women priests, or why can't priests get married, or this, that, and the other question, fill in the blank, I just thought, no, can't do this anymore. And especially when I went to college, I stopped going to church and walked away from the whole system. So I went through the journey many of you will recognize. I went through the sullen teenager phase. I went through the sex and love obsessed phase. I went backpacking and hitchhiking in Europe. This illustration is not of any of those things, but it's a Tibetan image of the journey of the seeker who is seeking to tame his mind. The mind being depicted as a elephant. At first, at the bottom, the elephant is running wild and chasing the practitioner. Then gradually over time, the elephant becomes tamer and whiter. And gradually the practitioner grabs hold of the elephant's tail, then is able to lead the elephant, and finally is riding the elephant and flying in the air and doing all kinds of cool things, which I haven't done that yet. I haven't got to that part of my journey yet, but I'm somewhere in between. Anyway, I became a newspaper reporter at one point. I got married. My wife, on our honeymoon, got sick with a potentially life-threatening disease. That was an interesting catalyst. I got a job as an editor with the University of Chicago. I had no sense that I was doing anything purposeful or meaningful other than making money to pay the rent. I became depressed and angry. I was also terrible to be around, grouchy, irritable. Sports was violent and depressing, especially growing up in Chicago. If you know about Chicago sports teams, this was before the years of Michael Jordan and the Bulls, and it was pretty depressing. I stormed around the office, and finally I got sick of myself. And I was just kind of desperate. And there was nothing else to do. So I remember I just closed the door and sat there, and I thought, all right, I'm going to do nothing for 5 minutes. I'm going to meditate and quiet my mind. And I felt better, which was astounding to me. I had calmed myself down. And from then on, I decided to go in a more positive direction. So the more positive direction was finding meaning. One way was through researching my family history. I realized I was much more complex than I thought. My grandfather on my mother's side, for instance, was Chinese. That's my grandfather. Of the two people and the photo at the bottom, he's on the right. That's my grandfather, and that's my great grandfather next to him. And finding out this and many other stories was absolutely fascinating to me. I got out of the office grind and was able to write some books about the internet and the World Wide Web and doing business on the internet. And way back when, in the 1990s, when there were books, and there are books now, I guess, but it's not quite the same. But when you can make a living at it, I was very fortunate I was able to do that. And I was a reporter. That's not in a straight line, but I was a reporter before this when I was living in my hometown. That I was a reporter for my hometown newspaper. Excuse me. Became a parent of two daughters, and I discovered that's when everything changed, and I discovered that's what I was really meant to do. I was really meant to care for people, and that was changed my life. What is a chaplain? Since I mentioned that a lot, I better explain a little bit about what a chaplain is. Chaplain, the word refers to a cloak that a person wore in medieval times. And a spiritual person. A chaplain is basically a spiritual friend. And that means that not that you are out giving advice or have magic words to give people who say, hey, I never smoked, I never drank, why have I got this cancer all over my body? Why is this happening to me? But it is to witness and be present and acknowledge and maybe get someone's story, get to know someone, and even if just one visit, even with just a few questions, if you can acknowledge and be present for people, it makes a tremendous difference, especially when they're in a hospital or a nursing home and have nothing to do but watch television or stare at the ceiling, and to have someone really interested in them and listen to them even for a little while, I think makes a huge difference. I happen to work with palliative care, which works with seriously ill people and dying people. I was in 2 hospices and 2 hospitals. Second thing, lack of meaning can cause vulnerable persons to be hijacked. So in my life, I mentioned how depressed I was for a while. I've also been obsessed with many things over or in my life. I wonder how this rings true with you also. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with sports, with my own baseball team, the Cubs. And I remember, well, I'm going to date myself, but I got really into the New York Jets for some reason because they were on television all the time and they happened to win the Super Bowl when Joe Namath was the quarterback, and that was very exciting. And I can still name a lot of the players on that team because it just that's my I tend to have an obsessive mind. Then it was TV shows. I used to arrange my life around what TV was coming on that night. If MASH was on, All in the Family, or what have you, I would watch that. Later, I got into collecting. I collected fountain pens, which aren't even made anymore, hardly. Well, only rarely. And I got way more of those than I need. I didn't get into drug use, actually. That's one thing I haven't got into, but I know a lot of people get away from suffering or thinking or whatever through various addictions. And I think we all know about that. Another thing that people get obsessed with is work. In my life, I've had a number of supervisors in particular who were just workaholics. I mean, they were at work 6-7 days a week, and it was incredible to me to think about it. I was in and out of there. I was going home at 5 o'clock, and I wouldn't stick around. But a lot of people get their meaning from work. They get their sense of worth. They get their social life at work. And I was fortunate. I worked at a university where we had all these cool speakers and activities. I was in a Indonesian music group for a little while because they had one there. And I met this Tibetan Lama who came give a lecture there. There were all kinds of things like that. So work is important, but this study of the civilian labor force indicates that in the past, over on the right, that's the last 4 or 5 years, The number of people who have left the workforce has just skyrocketed. And the conventional reason for this is, oh, that must have been COVID, that's the COVID time. But COVID is over, and this overlaps. This goes a little bit before that. And this cannot possibly explain all of this. Work, I'm convinced, and this author, Charles Hugh Smith, is convinced also that work has less and less meaning for people. They're burned out. They're walking away. They're doing this. They're pursuing this phenomenon called quiet quitting, where they just aren't real. They're there, but they aren't really producing because they're just opting out of that system. And maybe they go onto disability if they can. One of the saddest things I've heard recently is the phrase deaths from despair. This can happen if people don't have a framework and a sense of meaning, and or their framework is exploded and they don't have it anymore. And this can be brought on by hardship, just basic economic stress, isolation, illness, lack of opportunities. And these are all described as alarming factors in the increase in mortality among young adults. Drug overdoses have been the biggest cause of death since 2014 among young adults, and with a big increase since 2020. And the author of this study in PubMed, Mortality Trends Among Early Adults, said the despair may be a factor. It's just basically too hard to afford to get by. And then even if you can get by, what's it for? What's it all about? Why are you working these long hours only to be stuck with high interest rates? You can't buy a house. It's becoming more and more difficult to buy a house. It's becoming harder to hold on to a house. I really feel for the financial pressures that young people are going through these days. As the author of this study says, as a group, young adults have experienced expensive housing markets and a work context in which work hours have grown in many occupations, both of which can make it more difficult to lead healthy lifestyles. Disorganized religion is my own term. This could be used to describe Buddhism. Maybe it applies to things like the law of one or New Age beliefs. I don't know. But the point here is that there's another study here, but that indicates that over the past decade, there's been a dramatic decline in organized religion in people who go to church or observe what you might call traditional mainline religions. And one reason why I wanted to explore this topic is that in my own family, we just had the holidays and we got together with our families. And I think about how many or how few people go to church or have any kind of spiritual beliefs. I mean, I don't care if you go to church. I'm not necessarily saying that, but they don't have a spiritual life, basically. And it concerns me. At the far end of the spectrum, nihilism can lead to truly destructive behaviors. Nihilism has been defined as an extreme form of self-centeredness driven by severe hopelessness and meaninglessness that, when externalized, may result in violence against others. And there was a doctoral dissertation, that's the title of it, in the bottom left-hand corner, and the author examined all 12 manifestos or diaries that various mass murderers have issued, and in particular the one issued by James Holmes, who perpetrated a mass shooting in Aurora, Colorado in 2012. did question the meaning of life, as among many causes. I mean, there's a lot of causes for. I mean, maybe you can't even put a finger on why people do these things, but a sense of meaninglessness and nihilism is certainly cited as one of them. And this is a difficult subject to discuss because of the recent death of our friend I mentioned before, but rates of suicide have also risen dramatically in recent years. A 2017 paper called Why Are Suicide Rates, entitled Why Are Suicide Rates Increasing in the United States, says that it is the second leading cause of death among youth, more than things like malaria or breast cancer. And I can't help but think of Viktor Frankl, a hero of mine, who wrote a famous book called Man's Search for Meaning. He was a psychologist who was imprisoned in the concentration camps in World War II. He was in 4 concentration camps, and he wrote about that. He also developed a whole branch of psychotherapy called logotherapy, which is therapy through meaning. And he said, if there is meaning in life at all, there must be a meaning in suffering. Suffering is an eradicable part of life, even as fate and death. Without suffering and death, human life cannot be complete. And this is something he saw in the concentration camps. So people who had some sense of meaning to hold on to tended to have better rates of survival. And he himself, he had been working on a book about logotherapy when he was arrested. And they took his book at the first concentration camp he was sent to. And so he was trying to piece together in his mind, he was trying to recreate it in his head, and this kind of kept him going, even as his family was sent to the gas chambers and he lost one loved one after another. Whoops. Next point. Meaning and purpose may be a prerequisite for 4th density. Consider the meaning of life. This phrase actually came up in a channeling in 1986 by the social memory complex, or an entity, Lalima. Meaning has to do with the nature of something. Purpose is its function. In essence, that which has meaning is consciousness. That's really amazing to me. That which has meaning is consciousness. So when you think a thought and wish someone well, that thought has meaning and power. When you think a thought and wish someone ill, that thought has meaning and power. Our own thoughts have meaning. And to me, this means we have to live consciously. You have to watch your thoughts and be mindful. Here's a quote from Quo. That which you came prepared to live for and die for is the cause of love and light. What would you die for? Is there anything you would die for? If you feel so inclined, type it in the chat. Don't have to, but it's an interesting question. What would I die for? When I think about that, I would die for my kids or my wife. If I thought it would help the world or people, I guess I might sacrifice my life. I don't know. It's hard. It's a hard one. But when with the quote, that which you came prepared to live for and die for is the cause of love and light. Just think about it. 4th density is love. 5th density is light. So this implies to me that some thing that means enough to you that you might die for it is the cause of this tremendous love, which can help you, can lift you into 4th density, and light that can lift you into 5th density. That's what I guess. No, there's another this quote, this is what fascinates me about these channelings, is that these sentences, they're even in the mundane sentences, there's something that's profound. The need at this time upon the planet which you now serve is great. They could say exist, the planet on which you live, but they say serve. That implies that we're serving. We're serving something. We have a purpose. And that's amazing to me. So it's the idea of service rather than mere existence implies a sort of meaning. All are eligible for harvest as far as I am concerned. Agnostics, atheists are eligible. I'm not saying that people who have religion, like the ones I met at the hospital or hospice, are the only ones, or Buddhists like me, you know. One time I went to visit a patient who was nearing the end of life and going into hospice, and I asked, as I usually do, if she had any spiritual beliefs. Well, not really, she says. You'll never get me in church. And luckily I had heard this or something like that pretty often, so I had a response ready. I said, well, tell me about something you love to do, some hobby, something you will never get tired of. And she said, gardening. Oh, great. Tell me about gardening. And she went on to tell me in great detail about the kinds of vegetables and it was really flowers she liked to grow, and what kind of containers she used, and how she put the containers by the window where she could see them, how she pruned the flowers, and how she talked to her flowers. So here is someone who doesn't believe in God and doesn't have a religion, no spiritual practice, formal spiritual practice, but she loves her plants and sends love to them, and they make her happy. What more do you need? She's in line for harvest, as far as I'm concerned. So this brings me to the fourth point I wanted to get across. It is better to believe in something than nothing. So in the hospital, I met lots of patients who helped me, and I saw how faith and belief helped them. I met a homeless man I will call Leopoldo, who had nothing. I mean, literally. He slept under viaducts. He slept out in the open. And I asked about his spirituality, and he told me he realizes God is everywhere, even in the street. And sometimes he prayed to God to keep him and his family safe when he slept outdoors or in abandoned cars at night. Wow. So I asked about family. He mentioned family, and he said, well, he had a daughter who doesn't even realize that he is her father. Oh, really? That's a chaplain question. Oh, tell me more. Back in Mexico, he had an affair with the wife of a friend, and that lady became pregnant, and the friend realized down the road that this was not his daughter. But he decided to be a good father to this girl. And Leopoldo was afraid that if he approached his own daughter and his daughter's mother to introduce himself, the friend would get mad and reject the daughter, and it would cause all kinds of strife. So he never spoke to this daughter at all. He decided to stay away and avoid trouble, and because peace in the family was best for his daughter. And it made him sad to be estranged from his daughter, but I was just awestruck by this, and I told him that it's so admirable to me. It's that you have, thinking of your daughter, you sacrificed your parented, your identity as a parent for her well-being. So you're staying away for the benefit of other people. And I said, because I am the chaplain and because he's very Christian, I said God would remember this generosity. And I said prayers for him and for a smooth end of life. And this confirmed to me that everyone has a story, and even with people with no possessions, except the clothes on their backs, can have a strong spiritual life. I met a lady who had been in chemo, several rounds of chemo, and had metastatic cancer, and was she had decided to try one last round of chemo only because her family was urging her to. Otherwise, she was content. She said she had 3 good friends in her church that she would lay down my life for. This makes me think of that quote earlier about what would you lay down your life for? What would you die for? That being the cost of love and life. And she had all these other wonderful quotes. It's up, as long as you're here, your job is to help people. What does that sound like? Service to others. Don't get so busy trying to live that you don't live at all. It's left to you to find happiness. It's your decision. There was a guy who, again, not super religious, but he was interested in the stars. His consciousness was opened by the stars and looking at and reading. So his bedside table had magazines about astronomy and stargazing, and this was very profound to him. There's a long story, a backstory about there was a woman that he loved back in Hong Kong. He came to the US to make money because he didn't think he had enough resources to ask her father for her hand in marriage. And he got sick over here. And now he was so riddled with cancer, he couldn't get back to Hong Kong. But he told me about when they met, they went into a church. They didn't get married, but the 2 of them went into a little church in Hong Kong and they made their own vows. And they said, when you are hurt, I hurt. When you die, I die. Your heart and my heart the same. I am yours. Wow, I get chills thinking about that now. But what your heart and my heart the same. So that's very. I think any Buddhist teacher would understand that. That's just what the Buddha taught, actually. And this tells me about the importance of love in this third density experience and how it transcends time and distance and even death. There's another story that I may have to skip over because I want to leave time for questions, but a lot of people I've noticed take on the role of caregiver. When there's somebody in their family who needs caregiving, they take on that role, and that becomes their job, literally, and that consumes them, and that gives them meaning. And there's a beautiful story about this kid. I'm sorry, the guy was 43 years old, but he was 2.5 feet tall. He had a disease that would prevent him from growing to adult size. He looked like a kid, and his sister was his caregiver, and she took him around town to the barber shop and the doctor, and would push him in a stroller because he couldn't see and he couldn't talk. He would just tap, and there was some funny code that the 2 of them knew that we couldn't figure out. I couldn't possibly figure it out, and it was amazing to see. Well, he died. He died on the day she was diagnosed with cancer. It was astoundingly coincidental. It's one of these so-called coincidences that Kuo was talking about at this most recent channeling. The kind of things that are beautiful, that are filled with meaning. And I passed along to her the phrase from this song that I like, called Nature, an old song. I'm dating myself again as an old guy, but the greatest thing you'll ever learn is to be loved and love in return. Because she, again, was an atheist and she did not want to hear about church or God or anything like that. I will skip over this one, but I just don't want to leave you with the thought that everyone I met in the hospital was a paragon of spiritual virtue, whether they went to church or not. There was one patient I met, a Jewish lady who she was raised Jewish, and she wanted to be buried with Jewish ritual, but she did not observe herself. She did not consider herself a Jew. She did not practice Judaism. It was a cultural thing to her, and she was a real loner. She lived in a rooming house, had lost touch with her family, came to the hospital without her computer, so she couldn't get access to her funds. She said she had a lot of money, but she couldn't get into it because she had to get to her computer to get to her accounts, and she wouldn't let anybody become her power of attorney for finance or healthcare. And we could not help her with her wish, and she had to be buried in a grave for people who don't have resources. So sometimes these things, not every story I encountered was positive. Although I learned a lot from her, I must say. I learned about the importance of connections and interrelationships, and when you don't have them, what can happen? So what can we do? We who have a framework, who ask questions, who read the raw contact, who study, who talk to our friends, who go to Coming Home, who go to Homecoming, who have read Journey of Souls, Destiny of Souls, who talk to our angels, who have crystals and feel the energy of crystals. All these things, we have something magical that a lot of the world doesn't have. We have a sense of purpose. We have a sense of meaning. What can we do? I suggest to you that you can be a chaplain. I would like you to be a chaplain. I would like you to forget about the letters behind my name, because that's a test that one chaplain organization made up to vet people to be chaplains and get into hospitals. And I wish it wasn't so hard. I don't think it should be that hard. We should all be chaplains. We should all be spiritual friends. What does that mean? Acknowledge what someone is going through. It's easy to be overwhelmed by all the suffering you see in the world, but acknowledge and witness what people are going through. The first noble truth as taught by the Buddha is translated as life is suffering. I would say that to patients, when they ask, why is this happening to me? I would tell them, suffering is baked into the system. It's kind of like some glitch baked into a computer program, in the sense that our bodies are always getting sick. They're always decaying. From the moment we're born, we're aging. From the moment we're born, things are changing. And there are so many things that can make us ill. Physical suffering of some sort is inescapable, and suffering of change, and suffering of not realizing the truth that your heart and my heart are one. All of those kinds of suffering. So that's one. Two, be a calm presence. As a chaplain, it isn't about having any magic words to say. It's about being present and listening. It's not what you say, it's who you are. Be a witness. It's about being a witness. People want someone to acknowledge what they're going through. I think I said that already. And shine a light, to quote the Rolling Stones song. Be a light to people. Be a support. Shine with radiance. In short, it's not that you have to use the title chaplain, but we can all be a spiritual friend who is available to anyone who is there to answer questions. This whole thing about LL research and the law of one that's question and answer based is another thing that's very profound to me. You don't need to give advice, although it's often tempting. I am often guilty of giving advice. It's not about that. It's about shining and being radiant. And if people ask you a question, or if they ask you to support, be there and be available, be a spiritual friend. You have a sense of meaning and you know your purpose. So, as that lady said earlier, as long as you are here, your job is to help people. We know this. We're not here to change people's minds or proselytize or get recruits into the law of one or whatever. But we're here to, through our radiance, to provide an example. So I think the amazing thing for us in our situation is that we do have answers. And I used to find that I wouldn't go around talking about Buddhism. I wouldn't go around talking about Dr. Michael Newton. I wouldn't go around saying, oh, my guardian angel is up here and they can really help you. I wouldn't say anything like that. I would just be there, and it would be in my mind. And this allowed me to be calm, even in the emergency room where it's almost impossible to be totally calm. I mean, at least I could appear calm. So I thank you for taking time to listen to me on a Saturday night, spend some of your Saturday night with me. And I invite questions and comments. And I also list my email address in case someone wants to talk sometime about something they're going through later on. Thank you. Oh, let me stop sharing. Sorry. Okay. Very good.
Thank you so much, Greg.
Yeah,
That
thank
was
you,
really
Greg.
moving.
Now I can see everyone. Wow, I couldn't see anybody before. Does anybody have questions or comments? Or do you want to have a different opinion about something, and maybe it is better? I don't know. Please.
Question. All right. Well, a comment, not a question. I loved what you said that, well, believing in something versus finding a meaning in life, and that how you asked people if they said they don't believe in anything, what do you love to do? Because that's a meaning too. I have my best friend from high school is an atheist, and I visited him last summer. And he's a very loving guy. He loves his family, he loves his children, he loves nature, animals, plants, you know. So he has a lot of love in his life, even though he's an atheist. And I mean, atheism is a belief system too, right? If you're an atheist, you believe that there is no God. I mean, that's an active belief that you're committed to.
Mm-hmm. It's a choice.
It's a choice to believe that there is no God. Yeah, right. So anyway, yeah, I like that part that you were talking about. Yeah, that meaning can be something other than just spiritual beliefs, right?
And sometimes our connection to love, our connection to the world is not a belief. It isn't a matter of, it isn't even in your head. It's just something that draws you, like animals. There are some
Mhm.
people who love animals and they're just drawn to them and they can train them. I admire these people because I don't have that patience at all, but it's just something that seems to be innate. It seems to be in them. So it isn't a conscious thing always. And that's okay.
Yeah.
I thank you for the service you do. To be a chaplain, that's not easy. And so many people need it. They feel alone, and you're there to show them they're not alone and to help them pass, because that's probably the hardest thing we do in life, right? Transition to that unknown. This energy doesn't die, it just transfers. And that's a big leap that we don't know what's on the other side. So thank you for all the lives you've touched. And to write 45 books, like, you don't even know how many lives you've touched, how many people you've changed the course of their life and made a difference. And so thank you for all your service.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you. I would often be scared. It's scary. A lot of people are scared to visit people in the hospital. A lot of people are scared to go walk into a nursing home. A lot of people are scared to use the word die. Uh, don't be. I told myself, I'm here to help someone. These people need help. Like if there was, usually there would be someone would be in the bed and the modern way of dying is you're unconscious. You're not talking, so they wouldn't be talking, but all the people around would be talking and nervous and upset. And I would just say, wow, these people don't know me from Adam. I got to go in and talk to them. They need someone. They need some help. And the moment I said that, I could do it. I could do it. And you can do it too. If you think, okay, service to others, I can do this. You'll try it and you'll see. Anybody else walk away from their, I didn't see any hand. I couldn't see any hands when I was talking. Does anybody want to talk about walking away? Was that hard for you? Because I guess I hated it when I had nothing. Was it like that for you? Anyone?
I can share. Yeah, there was a question you asked at some point about did you reject, what you grew up with, and Benjamin put a comment in the chat saying I expand on the foundation rather than reject, and that resonated for me. That I think growing up, the church that I went to was lovely. It was beautiful. Um, and it was like, I don't think you quite have it right, but it's still some really good ideas. So um, it was hard for me and confusing for me for a long time, for a number of years, to try to figure out, why is there war? What the heck is happening here? Why is there so much suffering? And what are we doing about it? And how can we solve this? And um, and it was hard and confusing for me to figure out, you know, why my parents hadn't fixed the problems yet, like as though they could have, like just the very young mind that was like, hello, we can't just sit around and have breakfast. There's like, there's people out in the streets. There's like, what? Hello? What are we doing? And that was tricky for me to see the adults around me not having answers to that. And I don't think that I necessarily have answers to that either that I could share with a child. But I do feel like I've figured out, I do feel a lot more settled in myself and in, my cosmology and what's happening here. I understand the purposefulness of suffering and, catalyst and all of that. But yeah, it was definitely challenging for a while to have so many deep existential questions.
Mm-hmm. I really like the idea of expanding on what you had originally. I came to an appreciation. For many years, I was mad at the church. I was mad about the Spanish Inquisition. I was mad about all kinds of weird things that the Catholic Church has done. I don't have to mention them. We all know. But when I saw how it helped some people, including my parents, it helped them when they were dying. I got a new appreciation of it. And what am I into now? And my wife, what are we into? We go to these Buddhist retreats, or we have gone, and we go to these teachings, and half the prayers are in Tibetan. They're in a foreign language that I cannot possibly pronounce. And people are wearing robes, and there's bells and drums and things. And hey, that's all familiar to me, maybe something in this attracted me because of my Catholic because I grew up in the time of the Latin Mass, and maybe I missed that somehow. I don't know, but I've come to a new appreciation of Catholicism and Christianity, and especially when I see how it helped people. And so I'm hoping I'm expanding a little bit what it gave me. I think the expanding idea is very, very good.
It's interesting. I was just reading a quote um, by Ra. It was posted on the LL Research on Facebook. And it said, not overcome, like not overcoming these desires, because then we're just putting it down or suppressing it. Or no, it's all about accepting, right? And so I believe we all know in part. And I want the wisdom, I want all the ancient wisdom, right? So each culture has preserved this ancient wisdom, and I want it all. I welcome it all.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I love how Catholics they honor Mother Barium. Like we don't have a lot of honor for the mother, you know. Pagans they honor the Mother Earth, right? And draw that up. I was, given Christianity. That's what was given to me. This is a painting, Chris Salvador's Key Sacred. Maybe that's Latin. I don't know. But it's all the elements in it. So you got earth, air, fire, water. It's the four elements. I am unity. Like I go to church, it's called unity. Right? I study the law of want. I want all the wisdom. And what I do is I make connections. Like I'm a mathematician, I teach math, which is the foundation of all, right? This same math is used in this science, this science. I see it as connected, right? There is no separation. I love how you were emphasizing that, right? That it's all one. And I really like making connections. So lately, it resonated what you say. Lately, I've been studying Islam. In their culture, I find deep respect, I find self-discipline, and I find huge generosity. And our culture needs that so bad. So us rejecting that, we're also rejecting that, and then honoring the mother too. Mother Miriam,
Mm-hmm.
she has a whole book in there, right? A Surah. So I'm like bringing it all together. So there's this talk about converting. Well, I reinterpret it as not converting. I'm and or neither, or both and neither at the same time. I accepted, you know, when I was younger, I can't not be a Christian, right? I've already accepted that. And, Catholics and Paulianism and all that stuff, right? That we don't have to get into. But it's always come, and like Ra teaches us that, and Quo, that the person of the heart comes, the holy person comes, and it gets hijacked, right? Maybe that's my word, but it gets hijacked and used for self-serving purposes. There's no religion that hasn't done that. So, but
Mm-hmm.
then there's deep seeds of this wisdom in it that's
Yes.
been preserved. And I'm like, yes, give it all. So now I'm practicing the prayers, and I feel in my heart called to go to Mecca to do is it Hajjah?
Hodge.
Hajj?
Hodge.
Hajj.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I feel deep to go there, and then watching people go there, and then there's just tears. There has to be such a high vibration there, and so much prayer there, and people are constantly praying there.
Yeah.
It's powerful. And the thing with Unity Church, there's prayer there too. So like, I want to go to all the places. I welcome it all because I think when we say reject or interpret as reject, which I don't think you really have done.
No.
I think you are expanded on it, and that foundation is a lot of, that you stepped off of and done that. So thank
Oh,
you all.
thank you. That's a marvelous comment, actually. You remind me that I didn't mention someone who was important to me. You might look into, or maybe you have, named Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell was a mythologist. He taught at Sarah Lawrence. He had a TV show called The Power of Myth, which you might find still somewhere. I think it's on YouTube. And he was one who found truth in all religions. He actually said all religions are true in their own way. And I heard that in 1989 or whenever it was, and I was like, my mind was blown. How could that be true? But it is true. All religions are true in their own way, but they do get hijacked, yes, as you say. And I'm one who I like to find the truth in each one, and I think there's nothing wrong with picking and choosing, and it isn't even a way of excluding or picking one thing over another, but it's finding eternal truths. You're finding eternal truths. Right behind you are all these eternal truths in that image, and that's all we're doing. And I think it's beautiful. I think that's what we need to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just real quick, Ra calls it, they're all distortions, but moving to lesser distortions. Love and light.
Yeah. And we have Landon on the stack.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much, Greg, for the presentation. I really liked it.
Thank
And thank you for everyone's comments. And when Wes was saying something earlier, it made me think like in my own experience, I abandoned Christianity for a while just because it didn't resonate with me. But what brought me back to it in a lot of ways was when I was like reading through the Law of One and how Carla approached Christianity. I didn't even know like such a approach existed of like mystical Christianity. And it kind of let me, because like when I was a little kid, I believed in all that stuff, and it kind of let me go back into it from a completely different angle. So I'm very thankful that that exists. But yeah, thank you for everything, Greg.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm so impressed with Carla's everything. I mean, I think I heard somewhere that she would talk to her plants and send them love. And she was into music, a very good singer, singing all the time. And all of those things are, it's all aspects of the same thing, you know? It's not just, oh, she was a mystical Christian. Yeah, she was, but she was a lot of things. And a lot of it was love.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just chime in, Landon, too, that I agree. I mean, reading Carla's and learning a little bit about how Carla viewed Jesus and seeing like her perspective of it was very, very helpful for me in kind of helping me to, because again, I worked as a nurse practitioner in palliative care, so religion and people's beliefs at end of life were extremely important. And her take on it really helped me to be able to kind of step back and understand that I can look at Christianity in a whole different way. So I agree, Landon. That was so helpful to me.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, my whole family is Christian, and like it just helps me actually be able to talk to them and like relate to them in a way that I can understand them. So
yeah, I agree completely. Yeah, it's helped my relationship with one of my sisters quite a bit too.
yeah.
Thank you, Carla.
Has his hand up?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Carla.
Yeah,
Neil?
go ahead.
I actually remember that Carla, when she was 7 or 8, had a near-death experience where she passed away and was guided by Jesus to kind of have a conversation, and they locked eyes, and he, said, "I'm real, feel this love," and that carried her on into her further love of Jesus. So she had that firsthand experience. And thank you, Greg. This was a wonderful presentation. I brought up a question for me. Has NDEs or stories of people coming back, has that helped shape your understanding or kind of trust in the other side?
Absolutely. And also, it can be very comforting to people at the bedside, once in a while, I would bring that up, I would tell people, go to this site. I think it's nde.org. I have to look that up, but there's all these stories gathered there, and it's just amazing because people had those things. You see that in the hospital all the time. They have visions of people in the room. I mean, maybe, and once in a great while you'd hear about a near-death experience. But yeah, we were profoundly affected by near-death experiences. We haven't had one, but hearing about them and reading hearing the Michael Newton books.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say early on in my career as a nurse, I talked to a couple of different patients who had NDEs. And again, for me, that was a point of really knowing, oh, it's okay. It's good on the other side. We don't have to fear death. And so for me, that was always a piece in my career that I kind of became the person when I worked in the emergency room who, oh, this person's dying, call Peggy. She'll go into the room and take care of the family and such. So, it was, but it was a really great experience for me to hear that because that helped me tremendously. So.
And people aren't ready to hear that stuff until they're in crisis, unfortunately. I mean, a lot of people. Maybe it's different for people like us who've been searching and exploring spiritual topics for a long time. I don't know, but a lot of people don't like to think about that until something happens, like Alfie, and their whole worldview is shattered, and they're like, "Wow, what is going on here?" And then they're broken open and they're receptive to talking about these things. So you might find that in your own life, that your family isn't open to it until something happens. And then take advantage of that opportunity gently and ask if people want to talk.
In our last few minutes, I'm curious if anybody who hasn't shared would like to share. No pressure, no obligation to share, but just making sure there's space. Yeah, we're gonna post, this will be on YouTube on the TOTOH channel, which, yeah, I don't remember the link for it at the moment, but yeah. Temple of the Open Heart, I think, no, I'll look it up.
I think it's so important for us to share our path like you're doing. It's great, we all are reflections of the Creator, and we all have little different angles and facets, and this was mine. I want to hear about yours too. So I'm glad you're doing this. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Okay.
The link to the TOTOH channel is in the chat if anybody doesn't have it. youtube.com/@TOTOH828. TOTOH.
Any last comments, reflections, questions?
Everybody has a story to tell. It's really true. And if nothing else, if someone is in trouble, or ask them about their life, don't ask them about necessarily what their illness is or anything, but ask them, hey, tell me about when you were growing up. What was it like? People love to talk about, they want to have a witness, and
right.
Thank you. Yeah, I was so glad you let me talk about my life a little.
Yeah, that was really good. Yeah, about leaving your past religion behind. I grew up with a mother who believed in reincarnation and things like that. She was not a traditionally religious person, but she was very spiritual. So, like Benjamin said, I pretty much just expanded on that as an adult. So yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, it's not an or, it's an and.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, thank you for gathering in this way, friends. Thank you for learning from one another and sharing the path.
Next week, next Saturday, we're going to have Scott presenting on. Do you want to say a word or two, Scott, about what you're presenting on? No, there you go.
Well, I had to unmute. Tonight I was just listening.
Right.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Fascinating. I am going to talk about it started with balancing, and I know I've got to go quickly here, or my study of within the law of ones and the whole spectrum of the different polarities, male, female, uh, service to the other, service to self. And I started finding myself one way or the other focusing in on what really makes the other side of this choice tick. And so I'm going to go into using current events, what in my opinion, they do, how they work, and what motivates them, and actually how they become our catalyst and how we need them.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
But
Cool.
try not to be too dark.
Yeah, right.
So that's a week from today, 7 p.m. Eastern. And it's not yet up on our TOTOH calendar, but it will be probably within a few minutes after we end this call. Thanks, Scott.
Well,
Thanks,
thank you
Greg.
everyone for showing up.
Thank you.
And
Thanks,
especially
everybody.
Greg for presenting. Yeah.
You have a good one.
Thank you
Yeah,
to
you
our
too.
invisible friends and support that was with us.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.